What if the reason you're not wealthy isn't your income, but your mindset? Think about it. How many times have you delayed investing because you were scared, avoided decisions because you weren't sure, stayed stuck because it felt safer than taking a risk? That's not lack of opportunity. That's worry controlling your life. And in this video, we're going to break down a powerful book that explains how to go from worry to wealthy. Welcome back to Money Library, where we break down life-changing books into powerful, practical lessons. Today's book is From Worry to Wealthy. This is not just a money book. It's a mindset transformation guide. Because before you build wealth in your bank account, you have to build it in your mind. Let's begin. Section 1: The Invisible Enemy, Worry. Let's slow this down, because this is the foundation of everything. Most people think worry is harmless. It feels like you're being responsible, like you're thinking things through, like you're protecting yourself from making mistakes. But the truth is far more dangerous. Worry is not protection, it's paralysis. It doesn't stop problems, it stops progress. It quietly keeps you in the same place while making you feel like you're doing something useful. Think about how worry actually shows up in your daily life. It doesn't come as a loud warning. It whispers. It asks, "What if this goes wrong? What if you lose money? What if you fail?" And those questions sound reasonable. They sound intelligent. But here's the trap. Worry never gives you answers. It only gives you hesitation. And hesitation delays action. And delayed action slowly kills opportunity. Now imagine two people with the exact same situation, same skills, same income, same opportunities. One feels fear but takes action anyway. The other overthinks, waits for the perfect moment, and keeps analyzing every possible outcome. At first, their lives look the same. But over time, a gap begins to form. One gains experience, confidence, and results. The other gains more doubt, more hesitation, and more missed chances. 5 years later, the difference is massive, and it all started with a simple choice: action or worry. What makes this even more dangerous is that worry tricks your brain into believing you're being productive. You feel mentally busy. You feel like you're thinking deeply. But in reality, you're just looping the same thoughts without moving forward. It's like sitting in a car with the engine running, burning fuel, but never pressing the accelerator. You're using energy, but you're going nowhere. Over time, this creates something even more harmful: self-doubt. Every time you don't act, your brain records that hesitation. You start telling yourself, "Maybe I'm not ready," or "Maybe I'm not capable." And your confidence slowly erodes, not because you failed, but because you never gave yourself the chance to succeed. At its core, worry is just fear of uncertainty. And uncertainty is unavoidable. No investment is guaranteed. No decision is perfect. No path is completely safe. So if you wait until you feel 100% certain, you will wait forever. And that's why the book emphasizes a powerful shift. You don't eliminate worry by thinking more. You eliminate it by acting despite it. Because action replaces imagination with reality. Instead of asking, "What if?" you start seeing, "What is?" And reality is almost always less scary than the scenarios you create in your mind. When you connect this to money, everything becomes clearer. Worry is the reason people delay investing, avoid learning new skills, and stay stuck in safe but limiting situations. It quietly shapes financial decisions in a way that keeps life small. So the first step in going from worry to wealthy is not earning more. It's becoming aware of how worry is controlling your choices. Because once you see it clearly, you can start breaking free from it. Section 2: How Worry Keeps You Broke. Now that you understand how worry works, let's connect it directly to your financial life. Because this is where things get real. Worry doesn't just sit in your mind. It silently shapes every financial decision you make. It shows up when you think about investing but hesitate because you're afraid of losing money. It appears when you consider starting a side hustle but convince yourself you're not ready yet. It keeps you in a job you don't like because the uncertainty of change feels more dangerous than the discomfort of staying stuck. And over time, these small, seemingly harmless decisions compound into a life where growth never really happens. The dangerous part is that worry disguises itself as logic. It tells you that you're being careful, responsible, even smart. But in reality, it's pushing you towards safety at the cost of opportunity. And in the world of money, excessive safety often leads to stagnation. Your money sits idle. Your skills stop growing. Your income plateaus. Meanwhile, the world keeps moving forward. Markets grow, opportunities pass, and those who take action, despite fear, start pulling ahead. Think about this carefully. Wealth is not built by avoiding all risk. It is built by understanding risk and moving forward anyway. But worry doesn't allow that. It exaggerates the downside and ignores the upside. It makes small risks feel huge and keeps you locked in a cycle of maybe later. And that later slowly turns into years. Another way worry keeps people broke is by draining their mental energy. When you constantly worry about money, your mind is occupied with fear instead of solutions. Instead of thinking, how can I grow my income? You keep thinking, what if I lose what I have? This shift in focus is subtle, but incredibly powerful. One mindset expands possibilities, while the other shrinks them. Over time, this creates a pattern. You start playing defense instead of offense. You protect what little you have instead of building more. You avoid mistakes so much that you also avoid progress. And the result is predictable. You stay in the same place financially, year after year, wondering why nothing changes. The book makes a critical point here. Staying in your comfort zone is often the biggest financial risk of all. Because while it feels safe in the short term, it guarantees limitation in the long term. Inflation rises, expenses increase, opportunities evolve, and if you don't move with them, you fall behind without even realizing it. So the goal is not to eliminate risk completely. The goal is to stop letting worry make your decisions. Because when worry is in control, you don't choose growth, you choose safety. And when you repeatedly choose safety over growth, you unknowingly choose a smaller life. Section 3: The Psychology of Wealthy People. Now that we've seen how worry holds people back, let's flip the lens and understand what actually separates those who build wealth from those who stay stuck. It's not just intelligence, education, or even starting capital. The real difference lies in psychology, the way wealthy people think, interpret risk, and respond to uncertainty. Where most people see danger, they see possibility. Where most people wait for certainty, they move with incomplete information. And this single shift creates a massive advantage over time. Wealthy individuals don't eliminate fear, they normalize it. They understand that fear is not a stop sign, it's a signal that they're stepping into something new. Instead of asking, what if this goes wrong? They ask, what can I learn even if it does? This reframing is powerful because it turns every decision into an opportunity rather than a threat. And when you stop fearing mistakes, you start taking more action, and action is where growth lives. Another key difference is how they relate to clarity. Most people believe they need to feel confident and certain before they act. Wealthy people operate in reverse. They act first, then gain clarity through experience. They know that thinking has limits, but doing creates real feedback. Every step forward gives them information, and that information sharpens their next move. Over time, this creates a cycle of continuous improvement that compounds into massive results. They also think long-term in a way that most people don't. Instead of chasing quick wins, they focus on building systems, habits, investments, skills that grow over time. This patience allows them to benefit from compounding, not just financially but mentally. Their confidence grows, their judgment improves, and their tolerance for uncertainty increases. What once felt risky begins to feel normal. Another subtle but powerful trait is ownership. Wealthy individuals take full responsibility for their outcomes. They don't blame the economy, their background, or bad luck for long. Even when external factors play a role, they focus on what they can control. This mindset gives them power, because if the results are theirs, then so is the ability to change them. They are also comfortable being uncomfortable. Growth requires stepping into unfamiliar territory, new investments, new skills, new opportunities. Instead of avoiding discomfort, they expect it. In fact, they often use it as a signal that they're moving in the right direction. This willingness to stay uncomfortable for longer periods is what separates short-term thinkers from long-term builders. Finally, wealthy people have a different relationship with failure. They don't see it as identity, they see it as data. A failed investment, a bad decision, a missed opportunity, these are not reasons to stop. They are lessons to refine the next step. And because they don't attach their self-worth to outcomes, they recover faster and keep moving forward. When you put all of this together, a pattern emerges. Wealth is not just a result of what you do, it's a result of how you think while you're doing it. And this is the turning point of the entire journey. Because once you start thinking like this, your actions begin to change automatically. You take more calculated risks. You move faster. You learn quicker. And over time, you build momentum that most people never experience. Section 4: Reprogramming Your Mind. Now we reach the turning point, the place where understanding becomes transformation. Up until now, you've seen how worry operates and how it quietly shapes your financial life. But awareness alone doesn't change anything. Real change begins when you start rewiring how your mind responds in those critical moments of hesitation. And the truth is, most people approach this the wrong way. They try to fight worry directly. They try to think positive, force confidence, or suppress fear. But that rarely works for long, because worry isn't just a thought, it's a pattern. And patterns don't disappear through resistance. They are replaced through repetition. This is the core idea. You don't overcome worry by thinking differently. You overcome it by acting differently. Your brain is not convinced by words. It is convinced by evidence. If your past behavior has been hesitation, avoidance, and overthinking, your brain has learned that action is risky and staying still is safe. That becomes your default programming. But the moment you begin to take action, even small, uncomfortable, imperfect action, you start feeding your brain new evidence. You show it that action doesn't always lead to disaster. In fact, it often leads to progress. And slowly, that old belief begins to weaken. This is why starting small is so important. Most people sabotage themselves by trying to make dramatic changes overnight. They think they need to invest a large amount, start a big project, or completely transform their habits instantly. But that creates pressure, and pressure pushes you back into old patterns. Instead, the smarter path is controlled exposure to discomfort. You invest a small amount. You learn one concept. You make one decision you've been avoiding. These actions may seem insignificant, but psychologically, they are powerful. Each small step sends a message. I can handle this. And that message builds confidence far more effectively than any motivational speech ever could. At the same time, reprogramming your mind requires awareness. You have to start observing your own patterns without judgment. Notice the exact moments when worry appears. Notice when you delay a decision, when you start overanalyzing, when you tell yourself, I'll do it later. These moments are your leverage points. Because once you can see the pattern, you can interrupt it. Instead of automatically falling into hesitation, you pause and choose a different response. That pause may feel small, but it's where control begins. It's where you stop being driven by old programming and start acting with intention. Another critical shift in this process is how you define failure. For most people, failure feels like something to avoid at all costs. It's tied to identity, to self-worth, to fear of judgment. But this perspective keeps you stuck. Because if failure is unacceptable, then action becomes dangerous. Wealthy thinking flips this completely. Failure is not a verdict, it's feedback. It's data. Every mistake teaches you something you couldn't have learned any other way. When you adopt this mindset, the pressure disappears. You're no longer trying to be perfect, you're trying to improve. And improvement is always within your control. As these changes begin to take hold, something deeper starts to shift your identity. At first, you're someone who is trying to change. But over time, through repeated action, you become someone who acts despite uncertainty. Instead of saying, I'm bad with money, you start to see yourself as someone who is learning and improving. This identity shift is powerful because behavior follows identity. When you believe you are the kind of person who takes action, making better decisions becomes natural instead of forced. Finally, this entire process depends on consistency. Reprogramming your mind is not a one-time breakthrough, it's a gradual transformation. You will still feel worry. You will still have doubts. But the difference is that you no longer obey them. You act anyway. And with each repetition, the voice of worry becomes weaker, while the voice of confidence grows stronger. Until one day, you realize something has fundamentally changed. You are no longer stuck in hesitation. You are moving, deciding, building. And that is the moment when your internal world shifts from fear to control, setting the foundation for everything that follows. Section 5: Small Actions, Big Results. Now we move into one of the most underestimated ideas in the entire journey: small actions. Because at this point, many people understand what they should do, but they still feel stuck. They wait for the perfect moment, the perfect plan, or a big opportunity that will suddenly change everything. But the truth is far simpler, and far more powerful. Real transformation doesn't come from one big decision. It comes from hundreds of small ones. We live in a world that celebrates dramatic success stories, overnight millionaires, massive investments, big breakthroughs. But what those stories hide is the process behind them. The reality is that wealth is built quietly, almost invisibly, through small, consistent actions repeated over time. Saving a small percentage of your income. Investing regularly, even when the amount feels insignificant. Learning a little more each day. Improving your decisions step by step. None of these feel life-changing in the moment, but together, they create momentum, and momentum changes everything. The power behind this idea is compounding. And while most people think of compounding only in terms of money, it actually applies to behavior and identity as well. Every small action you take is like a vote for the person you are becoming. When you choose to save instead of spend impulsively, you reinforce discipline. When you invest instead of hesitate, you reinforce confidence. When you learn instead of avoid, you reinforce growth. These actions may seem minor, but over time, they reshape how you see yourself, and that new identity drives even better decisions. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. A single burst of motivation might push you to take a big step, but it won't sustain change. What creates lasting transformation is repetition. Doing the right things even when they feel boring, even when results are not immediate, even when nobody notices. Because during that time, something important is happening beneath the surface. Your habits are forming. Your mindset is shifting. Your confidence is growing. There's also a psychological advantage to small actions: they reduce resistance. Big decisions trigger fear. They activate all your doubts and insecurities at once. But small actions feel manageable. They don't overwhelm your system. And because they're easier to start, they help you build momentum quickly. Once you're in motion, it becomes easier to keep going. And over time, those small steps lead to bigger and more confident decisions naturally. Another important insight is that small actions create feedback loops. When you take a step, you get a result, even if it's small. That result teaches you something. It gives you clarity. And that clarity improves your next step. This cycle of action, then feedback, then adjustment is what drives real progress. Without action, there is no feedback. And without feedback, there is no improvement. Now think about the long-term impact. Imagine two people over 5 years. One waits for the perfect moment, takes occasional big actions, and then stops. The other takes small, consistent steps every single week. At first, the difference is barely noticeable. But over time, the gap becomes enormous. One person has built systems, habits, and confidence. The other is still waiting. This is the quiet truth about success. It's not built in moments of intensity, it's built in moments of consistency. And once you understand this, your focus shifts. You stop chasing big changes. You start valuing small progress. You stop asking, "What's the fastest way?" and start asking, "What can I do today?" Because in the end, wealth is not the result of one decision. It's the result of thousands of small decisions made consistently over time. And when you commit to that process, transformation is no longer a question of if, it becomes a matter of when. Section 6: Building Financial Confidence. Now we arrive at something that quietly determines whether everything you've learned actually sticks: confidence. Not the loud, motivational kind that fades after a few days, but a grounded, practical confidence that comes from experience. Because at the end of the day, financial growth is not just about knowledge. It's about your ability to trust yourself with decisions, uncertainty, and responsibility. Most people think confidence comes before action. They believe that once they feel ready, certain, and informed, then they will start. But in reality, confidence is built in reverse. It is the result of action, not the requirement for it. You don't wait to feel confident before investing, learning, or making decisions. You take small steps first, and confidence grows as a byproduct of those steps. Think about it this way. The first time you make a financial decision, whether it's investing, budgeting, or even saying no to an unnecessary expense, it feels uncomfortable. You question yourself. You second-guess your choices. But once you go through the process, you gain something far more valuable than the result. You gain experience. And that experience becomes evidence. It tells your brain, I've done this before. I can handle this. This is how confidence is built through accumulated proof. Every small decision you make adds to that proof. Every action, no matter how minor, strengthens your belief in your own ability. Over time, these small proofs stack up, and what once felt intimidating begins to feel normal. You stop overthinking every move. You stop needing reassurance. You begin to trust your own judgment. Another important aspect of financial confidence is resilience. Because not every decision will go perfectly. You will make mistakes. You might lose money, miss opportunities, or take longer than expected to see results. But instead of letting these moments destroy your confidence, they can actually strengthen it if you interpret them correctly. When you see mistakes as part of the process rather than a reflection of your ability, you recover faster. You adjust. You improve. And each recovery makes you stronger. There's also a shift that happens in how you approach decisions. At the beginning, every choice feels heavy. You want to get everything right. But as your confidence grows, you realize something freeing. No single decision defines your future. What matters is the pattern of your decisions over time. This removes pressure. It allows you to act more freely, knowing that you can always adjust along the way. Confidence also changes your relationship with opportunity. When you lack confidence, you hesitate. You doubt yourself. You wait too long. But when you trust yourself, you recognize opportunities faster and act on them sooner. You don't need perfect conditions. You just need enough clarity to take the next step. And that speed of action creates an advantage that compounds over time. Finally, financial confidence creates a sense of control. Not control over outcomes, because outcomes are never fully guaranteed, but control over your response. You know that whatever happens, you can handle it. You can learn, adapt, and move forward. And that sense of control is incredibly powerful. Because once you feel it, you stop being driven by fear. You start being guided by intention. At this stage, something subtle but important has changed. You are no longer someone who is trying to improve your financial life. You are someone who trusts yourself to navigate it. And that trust becomes the foundation for everything that follows. Section 7: From Fear to Freedom. Now we reach the most important transformation in this entire journey, the shift from fear to freedom. And this is where everything finally comes together. Because until now, you've been learning, applying, building awareness, and taking small actions. But this is the moment where those changes begin to reshape your life in a visible, undeniable way. At the beginning of this journey, fear was in control. It decided what you did and what you avoided. It whispered doubts into every opportunity. It made you second-guess your decisions, delay your actions, and stay inside your comfort zone. And over time, that control kept your life small, not because you lacked potential, but because you never fully used it. But now something has changed. You still feel fear that never completely disappears, but you no longer treat it as a command. You see it for what it is, a natural response to uncertainty, not a signal to stop. And this shift is powerful, because the moment fear stops controlling your behavior, your entire life begins to expand. Freedom, in this sense, is not about having unlimited money or a perfect life. It's about having control over your decisions. It's about choosing your actions based on growth, not comfort. It's about moving forward even when things feel uncertain. And that kind of freedom is available long before you become financially wealthy. Now your decisions start to look different. Instead of asking, "Is this safe?" you start asking, "Will this help me grow?" Instead of avoiding risk completely, you begin to take calculated risks, ones that align with your long-term goals. You invest in opportunities, in skills, in yourself. And even when things don't go perfectly, you don't retreat. You learn, adjust, and continue moving forward. This is where momentum truly accelerates. Because once you are no longer held back by fear, your actions multiply. You try more things. You gain more experience. You discover more opportunities. And over time, this creates a compounding effect not just in your finances, but in your entire life. There is also a deeper emotional shift that happens here. You begin to feel lighter. The constant tension of worry starts to fade. You're no longer stuck in endless loops of overthinking. Instead, you take action, learn from reality, and move forward. Life becomes less about avoiding mistakes and more about creating progress. And this is the true meaning of freedom. Not the absence of problems, but the absence of paralysis. You are no longer stuck. You are moving. You are building. You are growing. Over time, this freedom translates into financial results. Because the person who takes action consistently, learns quickly, and adapts continuously will always outperform the person who waits, doubts, and hesitates. The gap widens slowly at first, and then dramatically. And one day, you look back and realize how far you've come, not because of one big decision, but because you stopped letting fear control your life. And that is the final transformation this book offers. It doesn't promise instant wealth. It offers something far more powerful, a way of thinking and acting that naturally leads to growth, opportunity, and eventually, financial success. Because when you move from worry to action, from hesitation to confidence, from fear to freedom, you don't just change your finances. You change your life. Let's bring everything together in a way that feels real, not theoretical, not perfect, but human. Meet Sarah. She's 29, works a stable 9-to-5 job, earns a decent salary, pays her bills on time, and from the outside, everything looks fine. But internally, she carries a constant weight, worry. Not loud panic, but a quiet, persistent anxiety that follows her everywhere. Every financial decision feels heavy. Every opportunity feels risky. Every mistake feels like something to avoid at all costs. When her friends talk about investing, she listens carefully but never takes action. When she thinks about starting a side income, she feels excited for a moment, but then the thoughts begin. What if I lose money? What if I fail? What if I'm not ready yet? And slowly, that excitement fades into hesitation. That hesitation turns into delay. And that delay turns into inaction. Months pass. Then years. Her income increases slightly over time, but her life doesn't really change. She's still trading time for money. Still unsure. Still waiting for the right moment that never comes. And deep down, she starts to feel something even worse than worry, frustration. Because she knows what she should be doing. She's read the advice. She's heard the strategies. But she still isn't moving. And that gap between knowing and doing begins to affect how she sees herself. Then one day, something shifts. Not a dramatic event. Not a crisis. Just a quiet moment of clarity. She realizes that nothing is going to change unless she changes how she responds to fear. So instead of trying to eliminate worry, she decides to act with it. Her first step is small, almost insignificant. She opens an investment account. She doesn't invest a large amount. Just enough to feel slightly uncomfortable, but not overwhelmed. Her hand pauses before clicking confirm. Her mind runs through every possible worst-case scenario. But this time, she doesn't wait for certainty. She clicks anyway. And in that moment, something subtle but powerful happens. Nothing dramatic changes on the outside, but internally, everything begins to shift. Because for the first time, she didn't obey the voice of worry. She acted despite it. That single action becomes a reference point. A piece of proof. A quiet voice in her mind that says, I can do this. Over the next few weeks, she builds on that momentum. She starts tracking her spending not perfectly, but consistently. She reads about investing just a few pages a day. She sets up automatic contributions, small, but regular. Each step feels slightly uncomfortable, but each step also builds confidence. And slowly, the pattern begins to change. Instead of asking, what if I fail? She starts asking, what can I learn? Instead of waiting for the perfect moment, she begins experimenting. Instead of avoiding decisions, she starts engaging with them. Months pass, and her investments begin to grow not explosively, but steadily. But the real growth isn't just financial, it's internal. She no longer feels stuck. She feels in motion. And motion creates momentum. A year later, the difference is undeniable. Her income hasn't magically doubled. Her life isn't perfect. But she's no longer the same person. She trusts herself more. She acts faster. She worries less. And that internal shift begins to reflect externally. She negotiates better. She explores new opportunities. She starts thinking long-term instead of just surviving month to month. Now imagine this version of Sarah 5 years later. She has built consistent investment habits. She has multiple income streams. She makes decisions with clarity instead of fear. But the most important change is not in her bank account, it's in her mindset. She feels in control. Not because life is predictable, but because she knows she can handle whatever comes. And that is the real transformation. Not just going from worry to wealthy, but going from hesitation to action, from fear to freedom, from being stuck to finally moving forward. And that is what changes everything. At the end, everything you've learned in this journey comes down to one simple, uncomfortable truth. Your life will not change because of what you know. It will change because of what you do. You can read every book, watch every video, and understand every strategy, but none of it matters if it never turns into action. And the biggest reason most people stay stuck isn't lack of knowledge, it's worry. It's the constant need to feel ready, certain, and safe before taking the next step. But here's the shift that changes everything. You don't need to feel ready to begin. You don't need perfect clarity to move forward. And you don't need to eliminate fear before you act. In fact, the people who build wealth, confidence, and freedom are not the ones who wait. They are the ones who move despite uncertainty. They take small steps, make imperfect decisions, learn from real experiences, and adjust along the way. Because action does something that thinking never can. It creates clarity. It builds confidence. It gives you feedback. And over time, those small actions compound into results that once felt impossible. Not overnight. Not instantly. But inevitably. So if you take one thing from this entire video, let it be this: stop waiting for the perfect moment. Stop waiting to feel ready. Stop letting worry make your decisions. Instead, take the next step, no matter how small, no matter how uncomfortable. Because that step is not just a decision. It's the beginning of a completely different life. So here's something I want you to think about. What is one decision you've been avoiding, just because of fear? Maybe it's investing for the first time. Maybe it's starting something on the side. Or maybe it's simply taking control of your money. Whatever it is, what would happen if you stopped waiting and took that first step today? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one, and I'd love to hear where you're at in your journey. And if this video helped you, even a little, make sure to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe to Money Library for more content like this. Because here, we're not just learning about money. We're learning how to build a life where money is no longer something you worry about. Thanks for watching. And I'll see you in the next one.